Hey everyone, Dan here. We're about an hour after market close on Wednesday, July 28th. We're going to take an updated look at Wish. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not intended to be, nor should you construe them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, come to your own conclusions, and base your actions on that. Okay, so Wish had a really nice bump up today, over 6.5% to the green. Volume still quite low. You can see it down here as well, reflected in this sort of peel down from recent volume highs. So still a decent amount of buy volume though on such a green day. So I would say still nice to see. Now, what you're looking at here, if you haven't watched my recent videos on Wish, is there is this extension level, this fib extension that I was looking at, that basically is this impulsive move, and then the peel down from that to this 877 level gives us the extension levels to the upside. And these things are always sort of require some spotting, and so sometimes you have to rejigger them. Sometimes you think the move was here but it's actually there, and so on and so forth. This one to me is still holding up quite well. It's treating that 23.6 extension level as resistance, which is what I would first expect. I would expect it to flip all of these from resistance to support on its way up. And if it's truly going to act as an extension and play out, that's where I'm looking for these as my upside targets, 1424 and then 1762. So I would look to take some profits off the table. I don't know what that weird noise was, but take some profits off the table at those levels. And then if things are looking really great still at that 1762, then I would look at cutting actually somewhere sort of in between these two at the closer to the 200 range, not the full 261 probably. So looking probably around the $20 mark to peel off the rest of the profits. But again, that's just what I'm looking at. You should sort of come to your own price targets on the upside, of course. And that 877 would still appears as though it's going to act as our support zone at the moment. There should be an additional level of, I don't know if we want to call it slight support or additional support, right around, say, this level here. So right in this sort of thin blue line, put this here. That should hold as some most immediate support, and not just because that's where it came off of today, but because that's where we see resistance on the wick, resistance on the body, previous support here on this down day that it then lost the following day, and then that stretches back into this resistance zone here as well. So because it was treating it as previous resistance and support, those are typically very, very strong zones, whether you're encountering them as future resistance or future support. At this point, since the price is over this range, then I would look at it as our most immediate support and potentially giving it an opportunity to flip that 1006 price zone from resistance to support, allowing for the next attempt up to 1086, which these feel like very small dollar amounts, and they are, but in the context of the stock being under $10 at the moment, these are big percentage gains from day to day. Now, if it is going to actually come and treat this as a full extension, in my opinion, it's going to need to really boost this volume situation that it has going. The volume is still continuing to come down, so whether it's sell volume or buy volume over the course of an entire day, it just continues this sort of turn down that we see from these days when we were well over 100 million, or even well over 200 million, 300 million on some days. And I know that that is a lot to sustain, and I'm not necessarily looking for that, but it would be nice to at least sort of see this buy volume in these sort of ranges here, in the near like 75 to 85 million type of range, versus today where we have a little over 30 million. So that's just to say that that's what I would be looking for as an additional sort of supportive measure to this potential run-up if it can sustain and break out. Now, the MAs that we have here, the 20 coming down threatening a bearish crossover with the 50, but looking like it might get an opportunity to bounce off of it based on the green day that we had today, especially if we can back it up with another green day tomorrow. What I'm mostly interested in is the MACD here, which is actually still signaling bearish momentum dying down. So this dying down of the bearish momentum coming to pass, the MACD situated under the baseline at the moment gives it a lot of opportunity to run up if it can make the move. And that bullish crossover, if we can continue to put together additional green days to close out the week, I believe that we could very well see the bullish crossover happen by the end of the week. And again, this is on the daily, so that would potentially give some longer term price strength or buying pressure coming into the market that'll be a little bit more sustained than what we see on the shorter term time frames on the daily or on the 5-day chart, where things tend to just flip much faster from bullish to bearish and so forth. On the RSI side of things, with these green days, we're approaching the midline now, and I'm most interested in the midline. So you see here the midline, talk about the candlesticks having previous resistance and support zones. So does the RSI. So you see here right on the midline, you see this previous area of resistance that it then pushed down from because it couldn't overcome it. And then here, prior to that, you see it acting as support. So it came down to the 50, bounced up, and that allowed it to push into nearly overbought territory. Now, it's been really nicely in this range. It hasn't been scurrying a bunch into overboughts and then a bunch into oversold. So while this feels like pretty significant percentage fluctuations, and it still feels like a relatively volatile stock, it is interesting that it's still holding itself in between true overbought and true oversold. So to me, that just says there's still strong potential, sort of pent-up momentum that could be unleashed really, really strongly in one direction or the other. And what I'm going to be looking for in the RSI here is that it approaches the 50. Can it overcome it and or just blow right through it? But can it develop some support over 50 that will then push it at least toward overbought? And in that case, that could give it pretty solid capabilities to push through some of these upper extension levels and really get some of that momentum going. And even then, if it comes back down and tests the midline and bounces back off, then it could give it an additional push upward, potentially even higher on the RSI than the previous push up, and that could allow it to approach some of these double digit, I guess I should say these teen zones, 13, 14 zones. But first thing is first, we have to see what it does when it gets there, but that's how I'm looking at the RSI at the moment. Now, if we want to zoom in and take a shorter term view of things on the 5-day, 5-minute here, we do see a couple of interesting things. So I have to zoom out a little bit further, or I'll just scroll back a little bit, but we do see this 1006 zone is very, very important. It sort of accumulated itself along this line, and then when it lost it and flipped it to resistance, it really lost it, right? And came down and had to catch the next 877 zone pretty much in full. It got down to 881, so that's pretty darn close, penny to penny. And then that's where it was able to run up. So it essentially treated this like a range-bound channel, essentially. It tested it came through the full top, tested the full bottom twice, and now has come up and is retesting the top. Now, this is where if it can really establish support and get out of there, that would obviously be what I'd be looking for on the bullish side of things. But just know that it has shown a tendency to bounce around in between these areas, and so that could still be essentially how it continues to move. Now, there is a channel that's forming in here, but it is quite steep. That said, a volatile stock like Wish could certainly maintain this. It's been maintaining this for 2 days, which in and of itself is relatively impressive. But this would obviously push it over this 1006 level and gain support over 1006 by open tomorrow, very close to open. Within the first hour of the trading day, it would have to establish support over 1006 if it wants to maintain this channel. If it can maintain this for another day, that would actually be very, very impressive. Like I said, just because this channel is so steep, and that would really drive some pressure into some of those higher extension zones pretty quickly, even before the week gets out. So be interesting to see what happens there. Now, on the shorter term indicator side of things, the MACD coming down and dying off the bearish pressure. So actually, the overall MACD does not look like the daily, but from the perspective of, is this bearish momentum dying down, and are we about to have a bullish crossover? And that way it does. And so it's nice to see those longer term and shorter term things having a moment of confluence, and that could provide sort of a powder keg from which it can blast off, if you will. On the MA side of things right now, treating the 50 and the 20 as a bit of resistance zone. You see it followed the 20 up here nicely all day, and then when it crossed over, it fell through both the 20 and the 50. So we'll be looking for it to regain support over the 20 and allow the 20 to just kind of carry it up through this channel if it's able to continue to hold it. On the RSI shorter term, even though it had this nice run up today, it is situated nicely below the midline, so certainly a bunch of ability to come up. That said, the RSI has been running itself down. These highs are all lower, and so unless we can make a nice run up into overbought here, I could see the potential for it to come down additionally. And if it does, it certainly has the bottom of this channel for potential support. We'll see how alive and well that channel is, but that would be what I'd be looking for on the shorter term chart side of things. Now, on the data quickly, and then we will wrap this video up. We do have this options alert, August 13th, $10 calls. All right, so just about at the money calls at the ask. So 1,000 at $75 a contract versus $15.69 open interest. So these are basically aligning themselves with that 8/12 earnings expected earnings release, and could be really interesting to see what's going on there, because obviously whoever effectuated these 1,000 contracts really wanted them because they just hit the request of hit the ask. They weren't sort of waiting for it to come down to the bid. So that's why that's sort of like a really strong alert. That's and the sheer number. So 1,000 coming out at the ask currently versus just a current open interest of $15.69. I mean, it almost matching the open interest in just that transaction. So really interesting there. On the short interest side of things, 14.5% being estimated by Ortex today, or maybe that was previously. Sorry, today it's coming down a bit. So Ortex has today just 7% of the free float with short interest. That said, the utilization is still very, very high, over 80%. And we see the previous, was that the previous free float on loan, 1503 previously. And here we're looking at the short interest, 14.5 previously. So it has come down quite a bit. So shorts seem to be kind of removing themselves. Somebody is executing this type of a trade. The question here is always, is this somebody who actually knows something and is basing this off of valuable information that could be actually an indicator of what's going to happen or not? And certainly I've seen these mean nothing a lot of times, so take that with a big grain of salt. And of course, on the analyst side of things, to the extent to which folks latch on to Wish and follow the analysts relatively blindly, $16 consensus price target, almost 61% of upside. That said, it's a moderate buy with a pretty lackluster 2 buy 4 hold kind of situation and a low price target of 12. So even that has pretty significant upside if you're even just going with the lowest price target. So to the extent to which folks follow that, or institutions follow the analysts in order to make their decisions, that could play a factor, especially if earnings go well in August. All right, well, good luck if you're trading Wish this week. It should be an interesting finish to the week, and we'll have to see how it goes. But I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.